Tonight we're going to be discussing The Prophet by Kahlil Gibran. And in preparation for this, what I want to talk about is I've selected a handful of his poems or his prose to share with you tonight. And the reason that I've chosen these is because I think they're particularly applicable to the work that we do at Evoke, the work that we do in our relationships, the work that we do with your individual clients, your children in our program. So I'm going to get right into that and share those with you. I think this is a book that written almost 100 years ago. In a few years, it'll be 100 years. It's a book that I think speaks to a lot of the things that we know now through science about attachment, about healthy connection with a child, healthy connection with each other. And so it's always nice to see something that comes through some other medium that speaks the truth and that offers us something, and then our science catches up with it later. J.D. Gill said, "Metaphor is the device that evokes. It allows us to talk about feelings and experiences beyond the capacity of simple expression." So tonight, I'm going to read, like I said, a handful of these poems, and I'm going to share with you my thoughts and just kind of pull out from them where I think they speak to the work that we do at Evoke with parents and with the children that we serve in our wilderness program. Having said that, I just want to highlight that there's a lot more to this, that if anybody wants to share any of their own thoughts and insights, I'll be happy to read those comments as we go along. The first one, and I took these virtually in order, the first one is about marriage. And again, I think about it not just in terms of marriage, but in terms of any intimate relationship. Then Almitra spoke again and said, "And what of marriage, master?" And he answered, saying, "You were born together, and together you shall be forevermore. You shall be together when the white wings of death scatter your days. Aye, you shall be together even in the silent memory of God. But let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. Love one another, but do not make a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. Fill each other's cup, but drink not from one cup. Give one another of your bread, but eat not from the same loaf. Sing and dance together and be joyous, but let each of you be alone. Even as the strings of a lute are alone, though they quiver with the same music. Give your hearts, but not into each other's keeping. For only the hand of life can contain your hearts, and stand together, yet not too near together. For the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress tree grow not in each other's shadow." A lot of times we talk about this idea of a healthy relationship, this idea of intimacy, and you can hear throughout this particular poem the theme of separateness in your togetherness. Right? When I talk about, or when psychologists talk about healthy detachment, they're talking about the fact that if we're caught up in each other's space, in each other's drama, and each other's reactiveness, even the idea that sometimes we believe, growing up believing that it's my job to take care of you at a fundamental psychological level, that we're really not creating healthy intimacy. I talk about this idea that the first ingredient in intimacy is a well-developed self. And that intimacy is the joining of two selves, the connection between two selves. It's not a oneness, right? It's not an overlap. I teach all the time in parenting how that over-identifying with your children is the most significant, severe form of abandonment. Because when you, by definition, over-identify with somebody, you don't see them. You only see yourself. In a relationship where one over-identifies with another, the other is altogether lost in the equation. So it's this idea. And it can be scary. If we grew up in a home where relationships were about fusion and about oneness, and everybody had to be happy with each other all the time. Everybody was made to feel responsible for each other's emotions. Parents made children feel responsible for their sense of pride or disappointment or frustration or anger or sadness or happiness. Right? That old adage of a parent is only as happy as their least happy child. All of those things, when taught in a family, actually prevent intimacy. And what Gibran is talking about here is this idea that for there to be intimacy, for there to be quality in a marriage or in a relationship, we have to be separate. There has to be some space between us in our togetherness. So I thought that one, although it spoke about marriage and not necessarily children, I think it applies. This is one that is my favorite, and I think about this all the time. When I would teach parent meetings weekly, long before webinars, long before podcasts, I would end with this every time, with every new group of parents. And a woman who held a babe against her bosom said, "Speak to us of children." And he said, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, he loves also the bow that is stable." Again, this is 95 years old, this poem, but it speaks to the challenge of American families today, and families of other nations, of course, at the same time. This idea that we raise our children, but we don't own them, that they aren't an extension of us, that there's separateness in that relationship, and that's a psychological, emotional, and spiritual separateness. That we can set a model for them, but there's a letting go process that has to occur to it, of course. That we can't give them our thoughts, right? I talk about that all the time. That when parents try to give their children their thoughts, they take over the child's self. And our job, and he says it more poetically than I will, but our job as parents is to help develop a healthy self in our children. I think there's this wonderful empathic statement about our role toward the end, when he talks about that we are the bows from which these arrows are sent forth, that your higher power, the universe, life, sees the goal, sees the target, and he bends you. That's the pain that you go through as a parent. That's the transformation that parents go through in this process, that comes only through suffering and pain and difficulty, that transforms us into something different. And also recognizing that the universe, whatever your version of a higher power is, that your higher power loves and cares for you too. That you matter. That your journey, while in a different role in the relationship with your child, that it matters. So that idea of one of the greatest mistakes is the unlived life of a parent. So I think it's it's almost one, in fact, I have a picture with this printed on it that I have in my office that I keep and look at. It's fantastic. Joy and Sorrow is the next one I want to read. And I think this speaks a lot to, I think as parents, our temptation, as people, our temptation is to hope for only joy, right? That sorrow is something to be avoided, to be medicated, to escape from. Then a woman said, "Speak to us of joy and sorrow." And he answered, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked. And the selfsame well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears. And how else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds your wine the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven? And is not the lute that soothes your spirit the very wood that was hollowed with knives? When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that has given you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again into your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. Some of us say, joy is greater than sorrow, and others say, nay, sorrow is the greater. But I say unto you, they are inseparable. Together they come, and when one sits alone with you at your board, remember that the other is asleep upon your bed. Verily, you are suspended like scales between your sorrow and joy. Only when you are empty are you at a standstill and balanced. When the treasure keeper lifts you to weigh his gold and silver, needs must your joy and your sorrow rise or fall. So there's an idea in here about depression that I want to share. We think about depression as sadness, simple sadness, but maybe to an extreme. And there's a couple ideas around depression and treatment that I think can be helpful that this poem can help us to see. And that is that, first of all, sometimes the way out of depression is to embrace your grief, your sadness, and your pain. That it is the repression or the depression of unwanted feelings that takes away all of our energy, all of our life. We have this imagining that if you can imagine a dam at a river, we have this thought that if we can dam up the negative emotions, maybe by self-medicating, maybe by ignoring them or burying our head in the proverbial sand, that if we can do that, that somehow we can be happy. But when you take away, water flows and is one. And when you take away the sadness, you also take away the joy. And so they come together. I think as a parent, that can be particularly helpful because it is at times our impulse to try to take away our child's sorrow and sadness. But if we can learn to value wholeness rather than happiness, we can allow it to be. And that's what Carl Jung, the great psychologist, meant when he said, I would rather be whole than good. I would rather be whole than happy. And when Viktor Frankl said in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, that if we simply merely pursue happiness, that's the very sure way that we'll not achieve it. That it's about embracing everything. So it becomes our job as parents, when our children are sad, is just to sit with them, to honor it, to value it, to not talk them out of it. The problem is for most parents is that we see at times the irrational nature, the irrational thinking that goes into other people's pain and sorrow. We can imagine a way out of it through some kind of a change of thinking. It's the same problem. Look on the bright side. Speeches are just, in essence, a message that you shouldn't be feeling what you're feeling. That if you thought about it differently, you would be happy. Think about it this way. Messages, while we might imagine they come from a loving place, they come from a lack of capacity to embrace wholeness. And I think that's what this poem particularly speaks to me, is the interconnectedness. Very related to that is the next one on pain. And a woman spoke, saying, tell us of pain. And he said, your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Even as the stone of the fruit must break, that its heart may stand in the sun, so you must know pain. And could you keep your heart in wonder at the daily miracles of your life, your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. And you would accept the seasons of your heart, even as you have always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields. And you would watch with serenity through the winters of your grief. Much of your pain is self-chosen. It is the bitter potion by which the physician within you heals your sick self. Therefore, trust the physician and drink his remedy in silence and tranquility. For his hand, though heavy and hard, is guided by the tender hand of the unseen, and the cup he brings, though it burns on your lips, has been fashioned of the clay which the potter has moistened with his own sacred tears. This is very similar to the previous poem. It's about learning to embrace pain. You know, I talk about this idea that people think that pain is the problem. We don't believe that as therapists. We don't believe that pain is the problem. We believe that people most often, people's attempt to deal with pain becomes the problem. But there is, in our culture, this idea, this overarching message that pain is something to be avoided, right? There's medication for just about every discomfort. I've shared this before, but when I was training for marathons and Ironman triathlons, long distance races, I asked a friend of mine who was an ultra distance runner, I said, what wisdom do you have for me? And he said, when you're training, this is the only thing he said. He said, when you're training and you feel something, some kind of pain, concentrate on it. Don't ignore it. Don't try to compensate for it, because either it's an injury that needs your attention or it'll go away. So concentrate on it. In Western philosophy sometimes, in Western culture sometimes, we try to avoid pain. Ironically, and he pointed this out, when we try to compensate for pain when we're training, we're more likely to create an injury. My daughter, after coming back from a knee surgery, went to the trainer that we go to as a family, the physical trainer, where we exercise. And we were running short sprints. And he stopped her and he said, you're not ready to run. And she said, why? And he said, I can tell that you're limping. I can tell that you're favoring your knee. So you're not quite ready yet. We'll do some other exercises to strengthen it. And I'm afraid if you keep running favoring your knee, in other words, trying to make it not hurt, you're actually going to get injured in the process. And isn't that the way that it is? What we do to protect ourselves from pain is the thing that causes us the injury and causes our loved ones to hurt also. So this is about embracing wholeness, everything. Sometimes I say to the families that I work with, to the parents that I work with, that one of the most common ideas that I challenge parents with is that they don't value the suffering, the struggle, the mistakes enough. And when you can learn to value the old adage, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, learn to value the 1 step back. Learn to be patient. Learn to sit with it. What does it have to teach you? What does it have to offer? If we just think about things as behavioral change, we miss the messages that our mistakes, that our setbacks have to offer us. And then there's a compassion about this in this one, right? There's a compassion to the fact that, yes, some of our pain is self-chosen, and it can teach us. That's not a judgmental statement. It can teach us something. The next one I'm going to share with you is self-knowledge. And a man said, speak to us of self-knowledge. And he answered, saying, your hearts know in silence the secrets of the days and the nights, but your ears thirst for the sound of your heart's knowledge. You would know in words that which you have always known in thought. You would touch with your fingers the naked body of your dreams. And it is well you should. The hidden wellspring of your soul must needs rise and run murmuring to the sea, and the treasure of your infinite depths would be revealed to your eyes. But let there be no scales to weigh your unknown treasure, and seek not the depths of your knowledge with the staff of a sounding line. For self is a sea, boundless and measureless. Say not, I have found the truth, but rather, I have found a truth. Say not, I have found the path of the soul. Say rather, I have met the soul walking upon my path. For the soul walks upon all paths. The soul walks not upon a line, neither does it grow like a reed. The soul unfolds itself like the lotus of countless petals. This is this idea that we're always on a journey, right? That we don't ever arrive. And that we don't need to present ourselves to our children as if we have arrived and figured it out. It's what I talk about when I talk about the families, when I say, your childhood wasn't the truth, it was a truth. And if we are to continue to grow, we will learn to shed the old skin. We will learn to keep dying, in the words of Joseph Campbell, and rebirthing a new self, a new version of ourselves. It's like the father who said during one of our intensives that at one point, a closely held belief of his that he had for many years, maybe his whole life, had been not only questioned, but it had been dismissed. Like the adages I've shared already, things like don't go to bed angry, or you're only as happy as your least happy child. There's so many things like that that we just take in, or that were given to us repetitively as children. And when one of those is found not to be true, then it opens up the possibility that there might be a whole bunch of new truths for us to learn. I metaphorically say that I think my grandparents, my literal grandparents, knew everything there was to know by the age of 30. At least that's the way they presented themselves. And then they were just dispensers of the way that it was. Not much listening or learning from anybody else. And that's not an easy thing to be around, right? It's not easy to be around somebody who's discovered the truth. So it's an unfolding, it's a growth process. It's a newness process. And it's a frightening process. Because to let old things, let old ideas die in us is scary, because they're what has given us a sense of safety and security. They're what has helped us make sense. But for those of you who have been in this process a little bit longer, you'll recognize this process that he's describing here. And there's something about this too, that it comes from within you, right? My job as a therapist is not to tell you my truth. My job is to guide you to discover your truth, to learn to listen to yourself. And what do your feelings, your experiences, your thoughts have to offer? This might be my favorite one. If this could just be the way that we live, life would be so much more, I think, beautiful and simple. This one is called Good and Evil. At the city gate and by your fireside, I have seen you prostrate yourself and worship your own. Oh, this is actually one on freedom. I apologize. Good and Evil will be next. This one is on freedom. At the city gate and by your fireside, I have seen you prostrate yourself and worship your own freedom. Even as slaves humble themselves before a tyrant and praise him though he slays them, I, in the grove of the temple and in the shadow of the citadel, I have seen the forest, the freest among you, wear their freedom as a yoke and a handcuff. And my heart bled within me. For you can only be free when even the desire of seeking freedom becomes a harness to you. And when you cease to speak of freedom as the goal and as a fulfillment. You shall be free indeed when your days are not without care, nor your nights without a want or grief, but rather when these things girdle your life, and yet you rise above them, naked and unbound. And how shall you rise above your days and nights unless you break the chains which you have drawn, which you at the dawn of your understanding have fastened around the noon hour? In truth, that which you call freedom is the strongest of these chains, though its links glitter in the sun and dazzle your eyes. And what is it but fragments of your own self you would discard that you would become free? If it is an unjust law you would abolish, that law was written with your own hand upon your own forehead. You cannot erase it by burning your law books, nor by washing the foreheads of your judges, though you pour the sea upon them. And it is the despot that would if it is the despot that you would dethrone, see first that his throne erected within you is destroyed. For how can a tyrant rule the free and the proud, but for a tyranny in their own freedom and a shame in their own pride? And if it is a care you would cast off, that care has been chosen by you rather than imposed upon you. And if it is a fear that you would dispel, the seed of that fear is in your heart and not in the hand of the feared. Verily, all these things move within you, being in constant half embrace, the desired and the dreaded, the repugnant and the cherished, the pursued and that which you would escape. These things move within you as the lights and shadows in pairs that cling. And when the shadow fades and is no more, the light that lingers becomes a shadow to another light, and thus your freedom, when it loses its fetters, becomes itself the fetter of a greater freedom. So that was a long one. But I think I used to give this to the students, the clients often, because young people are often seeking more freedom. And what I was trying to help them to see by reading this is that when you let go of expectations, right? Expectations for your children, for example, expectations about the way things should be, but rather just embrace what is. This is about faith and radical acceptance. This is about letting go. This is about surrendering. Then you become free. But when we hold rigidly onto the things that should be, when parents say, I've gotten off track, when the client says, I need this to be happy, right? When they attach themselves to those ideas, those concepts, they lose all their freedom. And there's also a lot in this about the fact that it's in you, that the enemy is in us. It's not out there. It's not in somebody else to fight. And then when we do battle with the devil's running around inside of us, we cease to be at war with others in this process. We develop compassion, patience, and love. All right, finally the last one, my very favorite of the book. This one is called Good and Evil. And for me, this is the difference between a psychologist and oftentimes what I see the average person in our society talking like when they're describing people. Of the good in you, I can speak, but not of the evil. For what is evil but good tortured by its own hunger and thirst? Verily, when good is hungry, it seeks food even in dark caves, and when it thirsts, it drinks even of dead waters. You are good when you are one with yourself, yet when you are not one with yourself, you are not evil. For a divided house is not a den of thieves, it is only a divided house. And a ship without rudder may wander aimlessly among perilous isles, yet sink not to the bottom. You are good when you strive to give of yourself, yet you are not evil when you seek to get gain for yourself. For when you strive for gain, you are but a root that clings to the earth and sucks at her breast. Surely the fruit cannot say to the root, be like me, ripe and full and ever giving of your abundance. For to the fruit giving is a need, as receiving is a need to the root. You are good when you are fully awake in your speech, yet you are not evil when you sleep while your tongue staggers without purpose. And even stumbling speech may strengthen a weak tongue. You are good when you walk to your goal firmly with bold steps, yet you are not evil when you go thither limping. Even those that limp go not backward. But you are strong and swift. See that you do not limp before the lame, deeming it kindness. You are good in countless ways, and you are not evil when you are not good. You are only loitering and sluggard. Pity that the stags could not teach swiftness to the turtles. And your longing for your giant self lies your goodness, and that longing is in all of you. But in some of you, that longing is a torrent rushing with might to the sea, carrying the secrets of the hillsides and the songs of the forest. And in others, it is a flat stream that loses itself and angles and bends and lingers before it reaches the shore. But let not him who longs much say to him who longs little, wherefore are you slow and halting? For the truly good do not ask the naked, where is your garment, nor the homeless, where has befallen your house? So this one is important. This is the way that I think about clients. This is the way I aspire to think about everybody. When I see people do horrible things to other people, in my moments, I try to remember this idea. It doesn't take away from the pain. It just doesn't turn the pain into anger and judgment. It keeps pain in its purest form, right? It's hurt and it's sadness and it's grief. So when I think about the things that go on in our society, I don't think about, therapists don't think about good and evil, right? Bad and right and wrong. We think about pain. We think about woundedness. Like this last paragraph says, why would I get mad at you, judge you for your woundedness if you did something horrible to somebody else? Why would my reaction of anger and judgment be helpful at all? The truly good do not ask the naked, where is your garment, nor the houseless, where has befallen your house? So I think part of the shift that therapy can offer, that treatment can offer, is to help parents move from this kind of moralistic paradigm to this mental health paradigm. In addiction, I think they do it pretty well. They talk about addiction as a disease. Well, guess what? They're all diseases. They're all brain disorders. Most of them have their roots in trauma. If not acute trauma, then low-grade, common, cold trauma, everyday trauma. Some parents will say, well, my child didn't have it that bad. But we don't get to decide how somebody feels. My favorite definition of trauma is anything less than optimal. And that really opens it up, doesn't it? Nobody has an optimal childhood. Nobody has an optimal life. And what I'm so grateful for as a therapist treating children, as a therapist working with parents, as a client myself, is this idea that offers me the ability to feel compassion toward others and toward myself. And when I find myself beating myself up or judging somebody else because of what they've done, because it was hurtful or ill-advised, or seemingly it had a motive to injure somebody else, my thought is they're hurting also. They're the most unhappy. And it's true that the people that need love the most are the hardest ones to give it. But it's also true that they need it the most. So this is, I think, if we could think of each other in our culture, our society, and in the world in this way, we could do a lot more to heal each other. And hopefully that's what some of your understanding and insight about your child's addiction, depression, anxiety, trauma, cutting, body dysmorphia, school refusal, hopefully some of the therapeutic understanding that you have around that helps you to see that they're not evil. They're just divided. They're not evil. They're just struggling and they're eating from dead waters. That's what happens. So you of course, I encourage you, if you haven't, I imagine most of you have heard of the book. If you haven't, pick it up. There are others that I think are just as meaningful and applicable to different parts of our life. Those are the ones that I chose. And it's also nice to give to a client, a student out in the wilderness, because it is poetic, because it is metaphor. It helps us to understand how far along they are, and it helps them to come to some of their own conclusions, because metaphor offers itself where it meets you where you're at, like parables and storytelling do. All right, if there are any questions, I'll go to some upcoming events, and then I'm happy to share any questions or answer any questions. We would like all parents to go to 6 12-step support groups, either Al-Anon, Codependence Anonymous, or Families Anonymous. You can Google any of those, and you can find meetings in your area. So we would like you to go to 6 while your child is with us. You can also go to NAMI.org, and there you can find resources and classes in your area. If any of you live in the Connecticut area, please email me directly, brad@evoketherapy.com. Happy to share with you somebody who's offering a lesson who's been through some of what you all have been through. You can listen to all of these broadcasts via the podcast app on your iOS or Apple device by opening up the podcast app and searching Evoke Therapy Programs and then following us there. On Android devices, download the SoundCloud app and search Evoke Therapy Programs. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. On Facebook, you can find us by searching Evoke Therapy Programs. The Second Nature Alumni Foundation on Facebook can be found by searching it there. And then, of course, our blog. My book, The Journey of the Heroic Parent, is available on Amazon. There are also audio versions of it available there. I have half of the upcoming workshops for 2018. So we would like, if you can possibly attend. This is something we ask every parent that can, to come to these workshops. So the first one, the next one will be in January 20th and 21st. To come to that, it's an experiential workshop, multi-family group. You get to experience a little bit about what your children experience. This is January 20th is going to be in Oregon, and then every other month it'll be at Entrada in our Southern Utah program. You can combine that with a visit to see your child if it's the right timing, if it works out. Contact Gail at Evoke Therapy for more information. We have the Finding You schedule up until May, up through April. The next one is January 11th through 14th. It's almost full, folks. This is a 4-day therapeutic retreat. Retreat that helps you look at your own family of origin, your own issues, how they relate to your current day struggles with your child or with other relationships, codependency, anxiety, depression, trauma. Is there. We do mindfulness and psychodrama activities. You can also schedule a private family intensive, and you can contact us by emailing, intensives@evoketherapy.com. I will be in New York this week, so for those of you in the New York area, please RSVP. It'll be 7 to 9 p.m. at the CUNY school, the graduate school there on 5th Avenue, right across from the Empire State Building. And then I'll be in the Bay Area, special presentation in the Bay Area, combined with another parent group on Wednesday, January 10th, 6:30 to 8. Email Andrea at evoketherapy.com for more information or to RSVP. Our pursuit trips are for families or young adults, sober fun, light therapy, adventure trips all over the world, any kind of adventure activity. All right, I'm happy to take any questions. Do you have any advice on how we can start to experience some of the joy since we seem to understand the pain part? It's a good question. My answer is surround yourself with people who have been on the journey. That's Al-Anon. That's Codependence Anonymous, Families Anonymous. For me, it's therapy. It's my own personal work. And as you know, and I know you've been on for a while now, it's a shift in thinking. And so we have to surround ourselves with people who think differently, with people that are on this path, maybe farther along on the path. So I know you listen to the webinars or watch the webinars and listen to the podcast. Make sure you're doing it and surrounding yourself with people. Have a sponsor in Al-Anon. I've had a lot of parents, hundreds of parents, tell me that when I shared with them early in the process that this work can be something that they eventually become grateful for, they look at me and they say, initially, they say that they looked at me and thought I was crazy, or they just didn't like it, and later on, they were able to find its sweetness and its joy. So sometimes it's a mindfulness practice too. Meditation can do that. Our intensives that we run, our therapeutic retreats and intensives, those are some where someone reported that they've learned to embrace it more. So therapy, 12-step meetings, education, surrounding yourself with people, getting a sponsor, mindfulness and meditation, the deeper therapeutic retreats and intensives, those kinds of things. You've got to surround yourself with people who are on the same journey, and some of whom are farther along than you are. I think it's essential. All right, folks, I hope this was a helpful point of contact, and I hope it brought you something. Go ahead and pick up the book if you haven't picked it up through Amazon, the book, The Prophet. And the next topic is to be determined. I'll be doing that next Monday, a week from tonight, Monday, December 11th. Thank you for joining us, and on behalf of your child, thank you for the work and effort you're putting into to transform yourself. Have a great week. Take care. Bye-bye.